Hello Booktube, hello friends, welcome to Lizziefaye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and in this video I would like to talk about a genre of books that I don't talk about a lot. You guys have heard me talk a lot about cozy mysteries. Sometimes I talk about romances. I talk a lot about middle grade books. I read a good bit of Christian fiction. I probably should talk about it more. I also read a good bit of nonfiction in various categories, self-help, organizing books, time management, things like that. But one category of books that I realized I have quite a few of and do read them fairly often is biographies and memoir books. Now, I don't know if the plural of memoir is just memoir or if it's memoirs. So forgive me for not knowing that. I should have, that would have been a good thing to look up before filming this video. But anyway, we'll try to get past that and move on. And hopefully you don't judge me too much if I am incorrect. But I am actually reading a celebrity memoir right now, and I'm reading it because it relates back to an author that I have read a good bit of biographical information about. And it just kind of got me thinking because I have been to several book sales and used bookstores and things like that lately, and I had probably a half a dozen new to me memoir or biography books that I brought home, and I thought I'll just do a video about that subject. So I kind of went through my shelves and realized that I don't really have a good dedicated spot for all of my biographical type books, and I may forget some. This is probably not going to be an all-inclusive video, but I'm going to just call it a shelf spotlight. I'm going to talk about the books that I own that are biographical or memoir in nature. I've kind of got them grouped into categories, sort of, but some of them really just don't fit into any sort of category. They're just kind of out there and obscure. Frankly, not books that I would have gone out looking for, but because I ran across them at a library sale and it was fill a bag or something like that, I thought, oh, that looks interesting. I'll pick that up. So I end up with this very eclectic group of books that just seem interesting to me. Some I've read, some I haven't. Now, I have read a few biographies and memoir books that I don't own, and I might mention those as I think about them. I mentioned a little bit about this subject in a recent video, and Donna from Dewey the Library replied back that she has read, I think, something like 50 memoirs and biographies in the last few years, and I thought, oh, wow, that is amazing. I'm sure I haven't even come near that number. But I went back through my Goodreads, and I was just starting to kind of look through and just see how many I had read, and I started a new shelf, and I was going to just add them all to that shelf and then go back and count it up, and then it just started glitching, and I gave up on that project for now. If I can resume that project and finish that shelf, then I'll put here how many biographies and memoir that I have read since starting Goodreads. But if it's not there, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to do that yet. But anyway, I might come back and add it to the description later, if you care. But it's a genre that I am interested in for various reasons. Sometimes I am interested in reading about authors that I enjoy reading. Sometimes it's just simply celebrities who I have watched maybe while I was growing up or while my kids were growing up, and I'm just curious about what they have to say. Sometimes celebrities write self-help books and things like that, and I've got a couple of those that I have bought just simply because I have a lot of respect for that particular author. And sometimes it's just for pure entertainment value that I pick these up, and sometimes it's curiosity. So let's just get started. Since this is a booktube channel, I think it would be appropriate to start with the group of books that are biographies about authors. And I think the one that will come to mind when you think of me is Laura Ingalls Wilder, because I do host the Little House Readathon and have for several years. And I have read quite a bit of biographical information about Laura Ingalls Wilder, both books written for children and books written for adults, as well as her autobiography, Pioneer Girl. And I finally read this last year after having owned it almost since it came out, and I very much enjoyed it. Just this month, I finished reading, maybe for the second time, I Remember Laura, compiled by Stephen W. Hines. My mom gave me this book when I was much younger, and I either read all of it or part of it way back then, and I wanted to read it all cover to cover. I started it back in February during the Little House Readathon, and I got about half done, and then I put it aside for all the other spring readathons, and then I didn't pick it back up until the beginning of July, and I finished it, and I really, really enjoyed it. Then, because of Little House on the Prairie, I knew about Melissa Gilbert, who starred in the Little House on the Prairie TV show and played Laura Ingalls. And so I've had this on my shelf for quite a while. Now, there's really not a lot of this that has to do with the filming and shooting of the Little House TV show. It is really more about her life up to the point where she wrote this. And I think this was published maybe in 2009. So it's, one of those situations where you have a child star who everyone looks up to, America's sweetheart, and then as a young adult, she does make some bad choices and things like that. And I know that she has written another memoir since this one, and I'm curious to read it as well. But I'm about 2/3 done with this, so I'm just at the point where she has married her first husband, Bo Brinkman. So anyway, I actually met her not long after that, and I don't know if she was already split up from him at that point. Her son, Dakota, was maybe about 4, and she brought him to Disney to meet the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the show I was doing at the time, which was Muppets on Location, with live action Muppet show that was outdoors at the Disney MGM Studios, we shared a break room with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In fact, some of the people did both shows. So she was in our break room while her son was meeting the Ninja Turtles outside, and she was talking to us and talking about how excited she was and how excited he was and all of that. And so that was really a fun moment. So I'm really just getting to the point now where she's at about the age that I met her, which was about 1991, probably, something like that. Anyway, a lot of fun, and, it is still very interesting. Her and I are just about exactly the same age, and I grew up watching her on television. So this was definitely a book that I wanted to read, and I was curious about. I have some other books that relate to Laura Ingalls Wilder. A couple of them I've read, and one I haven't. This is Prairie Fires. This is by Caroline Fraser. I listened to this on audio, and then my mother-in-law gave me the physical book, I guess last year for Christmas, and it's really nice to have that as part of my collection. I've had this book for a long time, and I have not read it. I think this was written back when the Little House on the Prairie TV show was still being made, because the drawings of the characters on the front look very much like the characters do on television. But this is called Laura. It's The Life of Laura Ingalls Wilder by Donald Zokert. And I have heard some good things about it, but I have not read it. And then this was written by a woman who wanted to experience all of the Laura Ingalls Wilder sites and tourist attractions and things like that, and it's called The Wilder Life: My Adventures in the Lost World of Little House on the Prairie by Wendy McClure. This was interesting. I didn't love it, but it was kind of a fun adventure as this woman went around the country and wanted to experience life like Laura Ingalls Wilder might have experienced it, and see all the places where she lived and things like that. And I have done a little bit of that myself. I have visited most of the Laura Ingalls Wilder home places, and as I recall, it was a fun book, but there was a little bit of content in it that I wasn't a big fan of, but still, I'm glad that I read it. Another author that you have heard me talk a good bit about, especially last fall, is Lucy Maud Montgomery. Now, I have only read 1 or 2 biographical books about her. The main biography that I read last year during the More Montgomery Challenge is this one right here, and I really did enjoy that. I also read the book Maud, which was a fictionalized biography of Lucy Maud Montgomery's young life. That was by Melanie J. Fishbane, and I enjoyed that as well. I sort of read the 2 simultaneously, and they went very nicely hand in hand. So I'm a big fan of Lucy Maud Montgomery, and even though I haven't read a lot about her life, I have read just about everything that was ever published that she wrote. I think the only things that I have not read yet are some of her diaries that have been published, and I do look forward to reading those. So again, a favorite author that I have really enjoyed reading about. Another favorite author that I have read a biography by is Grace Livingston Hill. This is by her grandson, Robert Muntz, and this book got damaged. Some moisture got in between this book and another one, and I'm so disappointed that this dust jacket got damaged. I've had this book a long time. I really enjoyed reading it. This is Grace Livingston Hill. She wrote Christian fiction back in the early 1900s. I have read a lot of her books, and I own all of them, and I several years ago started a plan to read and reread all of them in a systematic fashion, and I got maybe 2 or 3 read. So I still want to get back to that project, definitely. I really enjoy the old-fashioned feel of her books. And if you ever get a chance to read a Grace Livingston Hill book, I hope that you will, because they are really wonderful. Another author that I read a biography of either earlier this year or late last year is Louisa May Alcott. This is The Invincible Louisa by Cornelia Meggs. I read this mainly because it is a Newbery winner from the 1930s, and I am currently right now trying to finish reading the rest of the Newbery winners from the 1930s that I haven't read yet. And this I very much enjoyed. Now I believe someone told me, maybe it was Mitzi from Mitzi Reads and Writes, that she has read a biography for adults that was about her, and it didn't really show Louisa May Alcott's father in a very good light. And it didn't really shed a lot of light on the negative aspects that may have happened in the household of the Alcotts. And I'm not really sure because I have not read that other book. But I'm very curious, and just some of the things that were said in here kind of made me see a little bit about what Mitzi was probably talking about, but at the same time, this is written for children, so there's not a lot of negativity in this book. It's just a very nice biography of Louisa May Alcott and her life and how she got started writing. I have some that are based on people that are well known in Christian circles, and this one I've had since I was a child. This is a biography of Lottie Moon, and it's called Lottie Moon of China by Jester Summers. Lottie Moon was very well known for her mission work in China, and the Southern Baptists take up an offering at Christmas time that is named for her, and the money from that offering goes to support our Southern Baptist missionaries all over the world. And this is just a little story about the young life of Lottie Moon, and a little bit about her growing up and how she became a missionary in China. And I reread this, I guess, to my kids, and maybe I read it to my Awana class a long time ago whenever we had to talk about missionaries, and I remember very much enjoying it, and it is a book that, like I said, I have kept since my childhood. Another famous person in Christian circles is the hymn writer Fanny Crosby. I've got 2 books about her. One of them is called The Hymn Writer, Fanny Crosby, and this one is written by Bernard Ruffin and published by Barber. I have not read either of these. And then this one is called Fanny Crosby, the Blind Poetess. Now, I don't know if she put her poems to music or if that was done later by someone else, but she is well known in Christian circles for having written many of the hymns that we sing still today. So definitely am interested in reading this. Now, another book that I read that's a memoir of someone that I have actually heard speak and I have met in person, but I did take that book up to our church library to share. This is called Just As I Am. It is a memoir by David Ring, and I read this earlier this year or last year, and I really enjoyed it. David Ring is an evangelist. You can look him up on YouTube, and you can hear him speak. He is a man with cerebral palsy, and his testimony and his messages are so inspirational and wonderful, and I just really, really have enjoyed hearing him speak. He spoke at our Youth Evangelism Conference when I was a teenager, a couple of years in a row, and we even invited him to come to our church. He was going to lead a revival at our church where I grew up. And for some reason, he was unable to come. He had to cancel at the last minute. And then as I was reading his memoir, I read about it. He talked about, he didn't mention our church specifically, but I believe it was his wife had a baby or something. I don't know. There was something where he had to cancel a couple of revivals that he was scheduled to go to because he had to be at the hospital. And I thought, oh my goodness, because the years matched up, and I thought, wow, that's why he didn't get to come to our church. But later on, I saw him at another conference, and I had a chance to cross the street briefly with him to get over to the conference center and just talk to him briefly. And he's just such an inspirational individual. So if you ever have a chance to, I mean, you don't have to read the book, but look him up on YouTube and just watch one of his messages or, something about his testimony. It's fantastic. You will be blown away. And then the last one I have that is Christian in nature is this one. He touched them. I am really counting this as a biography of the life of Jesus Christ. I read this with my daughter Emily earlier this year, and we really enjoyed it. Not only does it go through every aspect of Jesus' life while he was here on earth, it also talks a little bit about the area where he lived and the people he interacted with and things like that. And I just thought this was really good. This was published by Ideals. I'm not sure how long ago, but the book was given to Emily when she was very young. From her great-grandmother who has now passed away. And I just thought it was important for Emily that we read this together. And we did, and I'm really glad we did. I got a lot out of it, and I hope that she did too. So anyway, it was a book that I would definitely recommend if you ever find it anywhere. Now, I have a few here that are historical in nature. This one I have on my shelf, and I didn't remember where I got it, and I opened it up, and it says, "Give back to Lori when done." Well, Lori is my sister-in-law, so I'm guessing that my sister-in-law loaned me this, I don't know how long ago, and I kind of forgot about it. So this is a book that I need to read and return to her. It's called Breaking the Code, A Father's Secrets, A Daughter's Journey, and the Question That Changed Everything. It's a memoir by Karen Fisher Alanis, and I really don't know anything about it. On the back it says that this woman was handed a stack of letters that her father wrote during World War II, about 400 pages of letters, and I guess it reveals some secrets and things that maybe she wasn't able to read until after he passed away. I don't know. It sounds really intriguing, though, and I do need to read that and get that back to my sister-in-law. Now, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law's mother, gave me this one a while back. This is The Shepherdess of Elk River Valley. She didn't ask for this one back, and I need to read this one, too. This is about a woman who lived alone on a Colorado sheep farm. Is it a sheep farm or a sheep ranch? I don't know. For 47 years, and it's her life story. There are a few pictures, I think. So yeah, it looks really interesting. And she, I think, read it and thought it would be something that I would enjoy. Now, this one, I don't know if it's about any particular women. I have not really glanced through this. I think I found this in our little free library several years ago. It's called Voices of Cherokee Women, edited by Carolyn Ross Johnston. And I believe this is going to be some true stories and memoir type stories and vignettes from Cherokee women. So I thought that sounded really interesting. If you don't know, I grew up in Oklahoma. I'm part Choctaw. I may have a little bit of Cherokee, but I grew up right in the heart of, the Choctaw Nation. It's part of my heritage. So I am very interested in books about the 5 civilized tribes, really any Native American tribes. And so I picked that up. All right, now I have another group of memoirs about and by people that have to do with their experiences with their animals. Some I've read and some I haven't. Now, probably the most well-known that you guys will have heard of is James Herriot. I have not read anything by James Herriot. I have cat stories, dog stories. I have All Creatures Great and Small. I have all the books. Have not read a single one of them, and I need to. But another book I have read that is adorable, and I would highly recommend this one. This is Kitty Cornered. It's by Bob Tart, and the subtitle says, How Franny and 5 Other Incorrigible Cats Seized Control of Our House and Made It Their Home. And I will tell you, for those of you who are hesitant to read books where, there's an animal that dies, no animals died in the writing of this book. So it is safe. It is safe for you to read. Another book I believe I have listened to on audio is Dewey the Library Cat. This little cat was dropped into the book return of a public library. The librarian ended up adopting it, and it became a library cat. And it is a delightful story. And, you think, why in the world would someone put a cat in a library, in a book return, where it could get smushed by other books, falling down on top of it? But on the other hand, it might would have frozen to death otherwise. I don't know. But it is a very nice story about Dewey. Another one that I thought I had a physical copy of, but I may have already moved it out to the garage and listed it on eBay. But this is called Homer's Odyssey, and it is a story of a woman and her experiences with a blind cat. I wanted to read that last year because my daughter adopted a blind kitten, brought it home. It had had eye surgery, and we decided, I can't even remember now if we had to feed him on a bottle or not, but he was in pretty bad shape when we brought him home. And now I'm looking at him right now. He is a big cat, and he is completely comfortable curled up on a blanket that I have in a little alcove right in front of me. And his name is Possum. He's still completely blind, but so amazing. We love this cat. And she takes him to Tampa with her when she goes to school. She's got an apartment there that allows pets. But right now she's home for the summer, and so Possum is home with us, and we love him. So I wanted to read Homer's Odyssey last year when we first adopted Possum, because I wanted to know what it was like to have a blind cat. And it was a great book. Really enjoyed reading it. But really, having a blind cat is not that much different than having cats who can see. He is super smart. He just seems to have this sense about everything that's going on around him, and he is just he's brilliant, and we love him a lot. And then another one that I have read that is about a dog that I have heard many people say they will not read because they know the dog dies at the end, and that is Marley and Me. Listen, let me tell you, don't not read it because of that. This is a fantastic book. It is a wonderful story about a man and his dog. And, it's a fact of life that pets die. They die of old age. Sometimes they die of disease. Sometimes they get in accidents. But don't let that stop you from adopting a pet. Don't let that stop you from reading great stories about animals. And this was just fantastic. I read this years ago. The book is so much better than the movie. Although the movie was really good, I highly recommend it. And I can't recommend it enough. It was a great book. And then I've got 3 here that my mother-in-law has given me that I have not read. I don't know anything about these. And if you've read any of them, let me know. This one is called The True Tales of Baker and Taylor by Jan Loach with Lisa Rogach. I don't know anything about that. This one is called Call of the Cats, What I Learned About Life and Love from a Feral Colony by Andrew Bloomfield. That sounds interesting. And then Strays by Britt Collins. It says, A Lost Cat, a Homeless Man, and Their Journey Across America. So that reminds me of another memoir that I have read, and I think there's actually 3 in this series, and I've only read maybe 1 or 2 of them. And that is A Street Cat Named Bob, and it's by James somebody. Oh my goodness, it's been a long time since I read it, and I don't even have the book anymore because I did put it in my eBay store and somebody bought it not too long ago, but I'll put a picture of it here. There's 3 in the series, and this is the one that I've read. This one I think was set at Christmas time, but it is about a homeless man who adopts a cat, and he and this cat have these wonderful adventures together, and it was a very inspiring story, and I very much enjoyed it. Okay, moving on. I thought I would share with you the ones that I just picked up recently, but I've already gotten them kind of mixed in with everything else, and I can't even remember now which ones that I just got, but I know this is one of them. This is Jim Henson, creator of The Muppets, the story of Jim Henson. It's by Stephanie St. Pierre, and this was, I believe, published not long after Jim Henson passed away. It is written for children to read, and I have seen Jim Henson in person. I did not talk to him personally, but as I mentioned earlier, I was in a Muppet show, a live-action Muppet show that Disney did. Actually, 2 shows, Here Come the Muppets and Muppets on Location. And Jim had a lot to do with the development of Here Come the Muppets. That was the first one that we did. And it opened about the same time that the Muppet 3D movie opened, which is still an active attraction at the Disney Hollywood Studios. But anyway, Jim came to one of our rehearsals. I did not get to be in the cast that performed for him, but we were all in the room, and then just a few weeks later, we found out that he had passed away. It was a really tough day for all of us, and you know, we reported to work, and they brought us all in and gave us the news, and then they let us go home for the day. And then after that, you know, we came back, and we did the best we could with what we had, and you know, we put on we did our best to put on a good show that we hope he would have been proud of. So I definitely want to read this, and when I saw it on, you know, at a fill-a-bag sale, I thought, that's for me. I got to pick that up. I think I mentioned that I have a small group of books here that are by authors that, you know, are celebrities, but they wrote books maybe about another topic, maybe like a self-help type book. And just because I, you know, respect them as a person, I wanted to read what they wrote. Even if it doesn't really apply to me, I still was curious about, you know, what they wrote, and I wanted to pick up their books. So I have 2 by Lisa Whelchel. You may know her from The Facts of Life. She was also one of the Mouseketeers in the 70s. They are the Mouseketeers that get ignored. Whenever I was first working at Disney back in 1989, we of course had the Mouseketeer group that were filming at the time. And that show was being publicized and talked about. They would refer back to the original Mouseketeers, but the 70s group always got kind of forgotten, shoved under the rug. I don't know. But Lisa Whelchel was one of them, and she has written a couple of books, maybe more than this, but these are the 2 that I have. This one is called Friendship for Grown-Ups, and I'm very interested to read that. Now, this one is on parenting, and I've probably had this one since my kids were young, but I never got around to reading it. But it's called Creative Correction, Extraordinary Ideas for Everyday Discipline. It's published by Focus on the Family. So, you know, definitely going to have a Christian message in here. So I'm definitely interested in reading that. And then another one I showed in one of my recent book hauls is by Candace Cameron Bure, called Reshaping It All. So this is more of a self-help book, I think, than a memoir, but still, I wanted to go ahead and show it because there are celebrities, I think, that have something important to share, and if it's someone that I have a lot of respect for, then I would like to hear, you know, read about what they have to say. Now, some of these are written by celebrities or about celebrities that I just enjoyed watching while I was growing up. So I think I'll start with some of the older ones and kind of work my way forward. Now, this one set of books I have because this was something that my mom was a fan of, and in turn I am a fan as well. And the movie is The Sound of Music. So I have 3 books that are related to Maria von Trapp and The Sound of Music. This one doesn't have a dust jacket. It's just called Maria, and I'll try to find a cover here and put it there for you, but it is called Maria, and it's by Maria von Trapp, and it is her autobiography or memoir, and I think my mom did read this one. In fact, I don't know what became of her actual book, but she did have this book. And then later I saw this one and I thought, oh, I think my mom had that book, and so I need to get it myself. Then I also found this one not too long ago. This is The Story Which Inspired the Sound of Music, the story of the Trapp family singers. This says it is written by Maria Augusta Trapp, who I think is probably the same person as Maria von Trapp. I don't know for sure, and I haven't read it. If you know, let me know. But anyway, I picked that up at a library sale at some point, and thought I would grab it. And then this one relates back to the movie. It is called Forever Liesel, A Memoir of the Sound of Music by Charmian Carr with Jean A.S. Strauss. So this is more of a memoir of, what it was like to make the movie, and Charmian Carr's experiences. She played Liesel, who was the oldest daughter of the Von Trapp family, and I have seen some of their interviews, and she talks a lot about how she kind of lost her innocence, doing that movie and things like that. So I'm curious to read it, and so I picked it up. And then I couldn't have a stack of biographies without having something about Elvis. My husband and I are both fans of Elvis. We even had an Elvis impersonator at our wedding reception. We've been to Graceland a couple of times, and I found this, I think, at a used bookstore or a thrift store, and I had to get it. This is Elvis, We Love You Tender. It's by Dee Presley, Billy, Rick, and David Stanley. So it is a vintage book. I have not read it. I got it just a couple of years ago. I think one day when I was out and about in Florida, I had gone to see one of my daughter's color guard competitions, and I always like to try to do some book shopping while I am in new places. So I picked this up at a thrift store. This has a copyright of 1979 and 80, so it's been around a little while. And then one of the celebrities that I used to watch on the nightly news as I was growing up is Charles Carroll. He would come on right at the end of the national news, and he would always have a human interest piece about somewhere in America. It was called On the Road with Charles Carroll. And if any of you remember that, put a little comment in the description. I just thoroughly enjoyed watching Charles Carroll, and I was always disappointed that he didn't come on every day. But, it probably took him a few days to get from place to place and find a good story, and things like that. I'm not sure how he found the stories. I'm guessing that people would write in with different, human interest ideas, and then he would take his motorhome and crew, and they would seek out these very interesting and amazing people to interview and places to tour and things like that. So I have listened to an abridged version of this. I have the physical copy here. I would love to read it cover to cover at some point, but I haven't at this point yet. When I was young, I used to watch the Lawrence Welk Show with my mom and my grandmother. We had a local connection. One of the regulars on the Lawrence Welk Show, Gail Farrell, was one of the singers, and so we would always watch to see if Gail Farrell was on. Of course, she always was. I believe that Gail Farrell took dance class with one of my dad's younger cousins, and they knew each other. So anyway, it was always fun to watch her. At one point, I got to meet her parents. They started a business in Durant, which was my county seat town, and they had an open house one day for their new business, and we went and got to meet them. There's a street named after her in Durant, Oklahoma. It's called Gail Farrell Drive. Anyway, I said all that to say, we love to watch Lawrence Welk. I think my aunt took my grandma to see a Lawrence Welk show in person, and I found this book somewhere, and it is in rough condition. There's some foxing and spots on the page edges, but I could not pass it up. In fact, it might have even been free in at the end of an estate sale when I was given some free books, and it's, like I said, it's in rough shape, but I didn't want to pass it up. I definitely want to read this, and I'm happy to have it. Now, related to the Lawrence Welk Show, I also picked this up. This is a book called Norma. This is about Norma Zimmer, who was also one of the singers on the Lawrence Welk Show, and I believe it is by her, so it's her memoir or autobiography. I'm looking to see if there's any pictures here. Yeah, here's a picture of her with Lawrence Welk. Just very interesting. I just, I have such fond memories of watching the Lawrence Welk Show with my mom and my grandmother that I wanted to pick it up. Another show that I watched a little bit with my grandmother, although she probably would have not wanted to admit that she ever watched soap operas, but we watched the CBS soap operas, which included As the World Turns and Guiding Light. Her favorite was As the World Turns, but I got hooked on that and Guiding Light and Young and the Restless, and I found this several years ago, and I had to pick it up. This is a book by Kim Zimmer. I don't know if she's related to Norma or not, but Kim Zimmer played Reva Shane on The Guiding Light. She was one of the lead females on The Guiding Light, and her book is called I'm Just Saying, because that was one of her catchphrases. The subtitle, this is typical soap opera: 3 deaths, 7 husbands, and a clone. My life on Guiding Light and beyond. Yeah. So I have been wanting to read this for a long time. I still haven't, but this just sounds really fun. Then I also have some, I guess, fan fiction that is based on a character from Guiding Light. I think it's called Loreleis Diary. I didn't pull it off the shelf. It's in there, but I found it at a book sale somewhere. And it's there was a character of Lorelei who was on the show for a while, and it's like it was written by her, by that character. So I can only guess that it's some kind of fan fiction, but it looked interesting and I picked it up. Of course, I also grew up watching Star Trek and reruns of Star Trek, because we know Star Trek wasn't really on for very long, at least the original series, but it lives on in reruns. And then, of course, I watched the other Star Trek shows as they were on, Next Generation and so forth. But I've always been intrigued by Leonard Nimoy, and I found this at a book sale several years ago. It's called I Am Spock, and I would love to read this. I think Shannon Riddler showed this once in a video a couple of years ago, and I said, oh, I have that book. We need to buddy read that sometime. So, Shannon, if you're watching this, let's do it. One of these days, let's get that done. Then another person I grew up watching when I was young, and this is a funny thing, I haven't really ever watched his older movies and things. I just grew up watching him on the Jerry Lewis Labor Day Telethon and loved him. It's called Jerry Lewis in Person with Herb Gluck, and I don't know, I haven't read it. I don't know anything about it, but there are, I think, some photos, and, I would just love to read it. Now, I did watch the Dean Martin show when I was growing up, when I was pretty young. I always enjoyed watching the Gold Diggers, the dancers he had on there. Then later on, as I was in high school, I took dance class with a woman who had been one of the Gold Diggers. I don't think she was one of the main ones, because every time I go and try to look at the list of Gold Diggers, she's not on the list, at least. Well, maybe she went by a different name. I don't know. But I did see a picture of her in a Gold Digger costume. I just thought that was the coolest thing, that she danced on the Dean Martin show. Anyway, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, of course, were always thought of together. And then later, when Jerry Lewis did the Labor Day Telethon, I would always have a goal to sit up all night. I don't know that I ever accomplished it, but I always tried. And a lot of times I would call in and I would donate, $2 or something, whatever a kid could afford, to the to the local TV station, and I'd get to hear my name read on the little breaks when they would come through and name off all the people who donated. Anyway, it was a fun part of childhood. Of course, my heart went out to all the people who had muscular dystrophy, and it was a wonderful thing that Jerry Lewis did. And later on, when I was working at Disney, I got to meet him. He brought his youngest son to Disney and got to meet Mickey Mouse, and I got to be Mickey Mouse's escort to that meet and greet. So while his son is meeting Mickey Mouse up at the front of the room, I'm hanging out in the back, just shooting the breeze with Jerry Lewis, thinking, is this my life? Oh my goodness, I'm talking to Jerry Lewis. That was amazing. Anyway, I definitely want to read this. Someday maybe I'll write my own memoir about all of the fun celebrities that I've had a chance to meet while working at Disney. But one of the people that I worked with at Disney before he became famous is one of the Backstreet Boys. Now, I worked with Kevin Richardson, who is the oldest of the Backstreet Boys, but I don't know that there's any book by him or about him, but I found this at a book sale one time. This is called Backstreet Mom, and it's written by the mom of AJ. So it's been sitting on my shelf. I have not read it. I do want to read it at some point. But anyway, here's a picture of the Backstreet Boys. They've been around a long time, but I worked for Disney for over 30 years. I started in 1989, so I had a chance to work with Kevin before he went away to become a Backstreet Boy. And I've, kind of tried to follow their whole career path, although I've never gone to see a concert or anything like that. I thought it would still be fun to pick this book up. Sometimes I pick up books just because of the pop culture of it. Since I grew up in the 70s and college in the 80s, I thought this would be fun. This is Don't You Forget About Me. It is contemporary writers on the films of John Hughes. So not really a biography, but a biography of films by John Hughes, and these are all the actors who were, close in age to me that I grew up watching in movies and things like that. So here's another one written by someone who is very much a part of pop culture that I used to watch when I was growing up. I think when I watched the original Batman, it was already in reruns. I'm not even sure when it first aired, but this I couldn't pass up. Boy Wonder, My Life in Tights by Burt Ward. Of course, Burt Ward played Robin in the classic Batman, and I loved that show. I just thought it was fantastic. So when I saw this book at a book sale, I could not pass it up. I have not read it, but it's definitely on my TBR. And another big part of pop culture in my early adult years was the Seinfeld show. I found this just a couple of years ago at an event where there was like a mobile bookseller who was selling books, and I bought this from her. It's called Seinfeldia, and it's not really a biography of Jerry Seinfeld. It's more about the show, but you couldn't really have Seinfeld without Jerry Seinfeld. So I picked it up. The subtitle is How a Show About Nothing Changed Everything. It's by Jennifer Keeshan Armstrong. Of course, this is the diner where they always ate, Jerry and his friends. Anyway, there are a few pictures here, and I just thought it looked interesting, so it was one that I wanted to pick up. Occasionally, I like to pick up books by and about business people. I have some books by Martha Stewart, but this is a book about Martha Stewart. I'm not sure at what point in her life this was published, but this is called Being Martha by Lloyd Allen. And then I found this one a while back. This is about Mary Kay Ash. I think it's actually by Mary Kay. Now, this was written by a star who is more from my daughter's era. She's a young celebrity right now, but I watched her TV shows with my daughter as my daughter was growing up. If you ever watched iCarly, Jeanette McCurdy was the co-star of iCarly, and she has this book called I'm Glad My Mom Died, and I definitely want to read this. Now, I got this book for Katie for Christmas. I know that might seem like a strange book to get your daughter for Christmas, but Jeanette McCurdy was a big part of iCarly. She also had a spinoff show called Sam and Cat with Ariana Grande, and I enjoyed that show. My daughter and I would watch, all those shows together, those two and Victorious and all of that. And apparently Jeanette McCurdy had just a really tough childhood with her mother, who was very much a stage mother, who was just very overbearing and just really enforced a lot of uncomfortable things on Jeanette as a child star. So I would definitely like to read this. I think it sounds really good. I think it's probably, I think there's some humor in it. It's also bittersweet, things like that. So my daughter read it right away, and I definitely want to read it. It's been on my TBR. All right, so now this one is just kind of random. I have read one book by this author that I didn't love, but this is such a cute cover, and I love the title. It's called Does This Church Make Me Look Fat by Rhoda Jansen. This is a story about a woman who grew up in a Mennonite household and later kind of turned her back on that and went on to, follow her own path. But she's got a couple of memoir books about her experiences growing up and how her life is different now and things like that. So I've read one of them. I can't remember the book that I read. If I can find it on my Goodreads, I'll put it here. There's also one of her books, it might be this one, that the same book is under two different titles. And in fact, I think I have both titles, but I just grabbed this one off the shelf. Anyway, interesting, but probably not what I would read again. And I may not read this one, but it's such a cute cover, and I love the title. I have a couple of other books that are about people that relate back to either where I live now or where I grew up. One of them is The $1,000,000 Mermaid by Esther Williams. Now, Esther Williams didn't live in Florida or anything like that, but she did film one movie at a location that is here in my county. It used to be called Cypress Gardens. They have taken Cypress Gardens and made it into Legoland, but the Florida pool where one of her movies was filmed is still there. I don't think it's on part of the tour anymore. You used to could take a boat ride around and see it. But then the botanical gardens are still there. Anyway, I've always just been interested to see the movie that was filmed there, and I still don't think I have ever seen it. I've always been fascinated with Esther Williams, who was a professional swimmer and appeared in movies, and of course her son Lorenzo Lamas, who I'm a big fan of, was in several shows that I used to watch. And so I found this not too long ago and decided to go ahead and pick it up. I don't know if I'll ever get it read, but you know, it just looked intriguing and I thought I would grab it. Then I've got two books about people from Oklahoma. One is a historical figure and one is a current figure in Oklahoma pop culture. The current person is Ree Drummond, and she is known as the Pioneer Woman, and I believe this is a memoir or a autobiography of her and how she met her husband. It's The Pioneer Woman, Black Heels and Tractor Wheels, a love story. So I've had this on my shelf for a while, and I have yet to read it. There's a picture of her and her husband on the back. And I think she has a restaurant now somewhere up in northern Oklahoma, and it would be neat to go there. And that just made me remember now I have a book somewhere about Reba McEntire. I think it was written by her. I'm not going to dig it out right now, but I'll try to put a picture in here and show you. But Reba has a restaurant as well. In fact, I got to visit there on my trip earlier this year and went in and took a couple of pictures. Anyway, I definitely want to read the Reba book as well. But I also have this book called Our Will Rogers. Now, Will Rogers was a historical figure from Oklahoma. There is a Will Rogers Museum in Claremore, Oklahoma, which I did not get to visit this trip, although I did go to Claremore in April, and I visited this really cool bookstore, which I showed in my book shopping vlog that was like 2 hours long. I think if you didn't see that video and you want to go back to it and you don't want to sift through all 2 hours of it, I think I put some timestamps in where you could see Boarding House Books is what it was called. It was in Claremore. But anyway, Will Rogers was from Claremore and was a very well-known figure in American history as well as Oklahoma history. And I ran across this book somewhere and I thought, you know, I've never really read anything about Will Rogers, so I should pick this up. So I was thinking as I was getting ready for this video, not too long ago, Kate Howe announced that she was going to start a biography reading project, and she was going to read a biography of each one of the U.S. presidents. And I thought, here I've got stuff like My Life in Tights, and Kate Howe is reading about U.S. presidents. There's quite a big spectrum of biography books out there. But I do have a few books about my favorite U.S. president, and that is Ronald Reagan. I have had this book on my shelf for quite a while. It is a doorstop. I started listening to this on audio. I was listening to it on cassette. I own an abridged version of this on cassette, and about halfway through it, one of the tapes broke, and I just never went on. I should have just skipped over that tape and kept going, but of course, that was when I had a cassette player in my car, but you know, shows you how long ago it was. I still have that set of cassettes somewhere, but anyway, it's called Dutch by Edmund Morris. And then recently, in my most recent book shopping adventures, I brought home two more Ronald Reagan books. Ronald Reagan Remembered on CBS News with an introduction by Dan Rather. And Ron Reagan, My Father at 100, a memoir. I think this was written by Ronald Reagan's son, Ron, about his father, and you know, it sounds very interesting. So hopefully, one of these days, I will get to it. But that is almost all of the presidential biographies that I have. I have read two biographies of Abraham Lincoln, both written for children. There's a Newbery winner that is a photobiography of Abraham Lincoln, and it is packed away with some of my other Newbery winners that I've already read, so I'm not going to dig it out, but I can put a picture here. And then I recently read to my daughter a Caldecott winner about Abraham Lincoln that I've already returned to the library. So I've read a couple of biographies about Abraham Lincoln as well, but definitely my favorite president was Ronald Reagan. I even campaigned for him in 1976 when I was in the 6th grade, and he ran for the nomination and lost the nomination, but I found a picture of him and Nancy that I cut out of the newspaper, taped it to a piece of construction paper, and taped that to a ruler, and made my own campaign sign, and came to school carrying a campaign sign. And my teacher, my 6th grade teacher, who was a Democrat, was not happy with me. She told me I was not allowed to campaign for politics in school. I don't know if that's true or not, but it was hilarious. Anyway, then, of course, he did not get elected in 1976, but he did get elected in 1980. And so then in 1982, when I was in college, I joined the Youth for Reagan group and helped campaign for him to be reelected. In fact, I was just remembering how, talking about pop culture, when I went to see Back to the Future, one of my favorite bits from Back to the Future is when Marty is trying to convince Doc that he's from 1985, and Doc says, "Oh yeah, future boy, who's the president in 1985?" And Marty's like, "Ronald Reagan." He's like, "The actor? Well, who's the vice president? Jerry Lewis?" So that was such a great bit. Loved it so much. Before I sign off, I'm going to jump in really quick with a couple of books that I had in the stack, but somehow I missed talking about them in the video. So this is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. I read this for my library book club several years ago and really loved it. It is so compelling. And the things that Jeanette Walls and her siblings had to go through in their childhood life was just unfathomable, really. I recommend it highly. She has a couple of other memoir books, I believe, at least one other one that I have not read, and I think she has started writing fiction now. So I need to go back and read something else by her, but this is the only thing I've read so far, and it's definitely worth picking up. And then another memoir I have, this was written by someone that I know, that I used to work with. And when she told me that she had written a biography, I said, well, let me order it. I want to read it. And I really enjoyed it. This is My Life as a Maniac by Patty Adams. And I'm going to put a picture right here of a memoir that I would like to own. And one of these days I'm going to have to get around to just ordering it. I don't think my library has it, but it is available, last I checked, on audio on Hoopla, and this is Idle Truth by Leif Garrett. Leif Garrett was my favorite teen star growing up, and I have, kind of on and off followed his career all throughout his life. And, of course, he's been through a lot of stuff, made some poor decisions, had a lot of tragedy that has happened. But he still continues to perform, and I'm still in a couple of fan groups that, exist. Some of us old ladies who were big Leif Garrett fans and have continued to be Leif Garrett fans. So one of these days I'm going to get around to reading this book. Anyway, enough about pop culture, enough about fun biographies and memoir, but this is just a collection of what I have on my shelves. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what your favorite memoir or biography books are, or if you have any on your TBR that you've been wanting to get to and haven't. I've actually been toying around with the idea of doing some kind of a reading challenge or readathon or something that would give me some kind of motivation to read some of these. So it hasn't gelled in my head exactly what I want to do. I know I found out that someone did host something in April of this year called People April, which sounds really cool. So I might just join in on that if that happens again next year. But anyway, just something I've thought about. If any of these I have shown are on your TBR and you want to buddy read them, let me know. I don't know how fast I can get to them, but let me know, and we'll see. We'll see what we can work out. So that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I need to go put all these books away, figure out where to put them, and I'll be back hopefully soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.